to be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. There's only one way to welcome tonight's guest, Hall of Fame sports writer Frank Brown, and that's with Bruce Springsteen and some of the NHL stars who love the boss as much as Frank does.
I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. My first Bruce Springsteen concert was, I think, in 1979 at the Ottawa Civic Center. His daughter's a world-class show jumper on horses, and there's this big show. My daughter was in ponies at the time. Bruce is there watching his daughter. He's leaning over the rail, and I'm right there, and I'm like, I gotta go talk to him, because he used to go to the Ranger games a lot. I don't know if he still does. I'm like, I just couldn't work up the nerve to go talk to him. And
Maybe we were born to run.
I don't know if you were born to run, Frank, but you were born to write. Welcome to Hockey Time Machine.
Thank you. It's very, very, very nice to be with you, and it's particularly stirring to hear the Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band introduction. The funny thing is that I, upon my retirement from the NHL, was presented with a goalie mask by my colleagues, and one of the on the back plate, the mask was painted by the gentleman who does many of the masks for the NHL goaltenders, and on the back of on my back plate is one of my favorite lines of Bruce's barefoot girl sitting on the hood of a Dodge drinking warm beer in the soft summer rain. And so it's touching to talk about the boss, and also to talk about one of my enduring friendships through hockey, which is with Bruce's drummer Max Weinberg.
How many times have you seen them in concert?
Oh, I would say 50 or more.
Okay.
I just saw the first three shows, or actually three of the first four shows of the current tour, and they're going to be going for quite some time. So I'm sure it'll be a little bit more flexibility in the set list as we go along, but it's just exciting, and really opportunity to enjoy some rock music history just to watch them perform.
Well, we alluded to your Hall of Fame status. The Professional Hockey Writers Association in 2019 named you winner of the Elmer Ferguson Award. Tell me about the day you found out, and if you had any advance hints that it was coming.
Didn't have any advance hints that it was coming. The ironic thing is that when I got the call from Mark Spector out in Edmonton, he was the president of the Pro Hockey Writers at the time. I was sitting in my home office, and the phone rang with a 780 area code. And usually I don't answer calls that aren't connected to my contact list, but I decided to answer this one. And it was Mark Spector, and there are some Weinbergs enjoying my Hall of Fame induction with me. there's Allie and Becky and Jay and his lovely wife Chloe. In any event, Mark called, and it was March 31st, and I went, "Oh, wait a minute! Tomorrow's April Fool's. This can't. Nobody would joke with somebody who made a career in of hockey writing." So I listened patiently, and he went, "Frank, there are a lot of parts of this job that I don't enjoy very much, but this is one that I really do, and congratulations." And so that's the irony of the timing of the announcement. But I didn't have any foreknowledge that it was coming.
Well, like a true reporter, when you won the award, you did some research into the man it was named after, Elmer Ferguson. What did you find out?
Such an interesting individual, and for so many reasons that we could do an entire program on it, Glenn. But one of the interesting things was that one of Elmer Ferguson's first bosses at the Montreal Herald was Frank Calder, who was sports editor and hired Elmer, and then turned over the sports editorship to Elmer when Frank Calder went on to become the first president of the National Hockey League. The ironic thing is that Elmer was said to be the only journalist in the lobby of the Windsor Hotel when the National Hockey League was founded in 1917. In fact, he was with a competitor, a colleague named Peter Spanjart, who was the sports editor of the Star at the time. In any event, when the meeting announcing the formation of the league, or calling for the creation of the league, the formation of the league, finished, Calder and Elmer had a brief conversation. And Elmer said, "Hey, what went on up there?" And Calder said, "Oh, not very much."
Tight-lipped.
So, in any event, the two ironies from a historical standpoint, Spanjart, who was also around the Windsor Hotel that day, was at the time known as the Dean of Canadian Sports Writers. And after he passed away, Elmer assumed that nomenclature. He was called the Dean of Canadian Sports Writers at the time, and he actually ended up being a pallbearer at Spanjart's funeral when Spanjart passed away. Also of tremendous interest to me, Glenn, and probably to not many other people who remember what a typewriter is and was. Through a series of childhood accidents, Elmer lost really the most of the function in his left arm and the use of the fingers on his left hand. And if you see what I'm privileged to be holding at the Hockey Resource Center, which houses so many of the Hockey Hall of Fame artifacts, that's Elmer's typewriter, and it's heavy and it's hard to type on. So if you can imagine, Elmer really only typed with I assume the forefinger of his right hand. But imagining at the time that you had to change paper in the process of filing your story, and so many of the activities of using a typewriter and writing a story on a typewriter involve the need for dexterity, and Elmer couldn't do that. And yet in one of the obituaries of his that I read, it was reported that Elmer could turn out an 800-word column in 90 minutes. Now, that was a big challenge with two hands on a computer, but on carbon paper in a laptop, I mean in an actual typewriter, using one hand only, it's a marvel.
He could write with one hand tied behind his back, right?
He literally had to.
And also, we should mention, because we saw the plaque behind the photo of you with the typewriter, just like the great players who have trophies named after them, Elmer not only has an award, he won the award he was named after, or that was named after him.
It's very interesting, though, that he never he never had the chance to wear his Hall of Fame blazer because Elmer passed away in 1972. The award was named or created in 1984. So it was, of course, posthumous for Elmer, but very, very interesting also to me from a historical standpoint was that because Elmer wrote for so many decades in Montreal, one of his more impressionable readers was Red Fisher, who referred in his biography to Elmer's word pictures as having been something of an inspiration to him. And it was Red, of course, the dean, the icon of hockey writers in Montreal, who worked with Clarence Campbell to have the award, to have PHWA members recognized in the Hall of Fame. And so there's Red, and myself, I was privileged when I was early on in starting in the league to be part of a ceremony at which Red was honored for his 50th year at his newspaper, and so I presented a small memento on behalf of the league, and it was a real privilege to be in this photo with Red on the right, Henri Richard in the middle, and of course Jean Beliveau.
Well, I want to ask you one question about this photo. In the picture, you're laughing, but tell the truth. With these three Montreal legends, you would have laughed even if what they were saying wasn't funny, right?
I'm so sad that I don't remember exactly what the wisecrack was, but it was a prized moment. I had the opportunity to be in the photograph, and I really feel that probably one of the best compliments I was ever paid was by Red when I was I don't even remember what we were talking about, but it was about, I don't know, changing jobs or something like that. And he said, "Well, I know I'd hire you," and that was as big a compliment. That was as big a compliment as a young hockey writer from New York could ever have imagined receiving.
An American, no less.
Yep.
Yeah, good for you. Now, let's wind the time machine back to when we both had heads of hair. My dad took me to my first hockey game, Capitals versus Kansas City Scouts, as a 14th birthday present. And I was hooked. When your dad took you to your first hockey game, Canadiens at Rangers at the old MSG,
Yeah.
you said you were more than hooked. You were fixated. In fact, you were pierced right through the heart, even by the organist, even by watching the ice resurfacing.
Yeah. Every aspect of the experience profoundly impacted me. And it was, a time when, the youngsters in the audience would have no knowledge of this, but there were sticks made of wood, there were skates made of leather, and the slap of the puck off of a wooden stick or even just a pass from one wooden stick to another made such an amazing sound. And the skates on what at the time was, barely one step above natural ice made an amazing, swooshing sound. So the body contact and the oohs and the ahs and
yeah, my terrier doesn't like it when there's a closed door between me and her.
Well, I thought I was hearing the oohs and ahs of the crowd as I was describing it. In any event, every aspect of the experience, and this is 1965, just completely captivated me, and I'm sure it's captivated millions of other young people who aspired to have a life in the game and go on to have amazing experiences who never ended up getting the opportunity. And I consider myself profoundly blessed to have been able to be involved in the sport, to write about the sport, to work at the National Hockey League as I did, and I know how lucky I've been.
And this isn't any old hockey ticket we're showing here. You actually bought a Rangers season ticket with your own money working at a pizza parlor when you were 15 years old. How about that?
Yeah, that's actually I was all the way up to 20 the year that I saved that ticket, but I made sure that I saved every one of my 25-cent tips from delivering pizzas, and sometimes I'd be lucky enough to get $1, but the truth of it was, at the end of the 60s, you could get a season ticket for I think I paid $97.50 for my season ticket in section 417, row C, seat 11, right on the aisle, and I would go to every game, and I would keep I had a scorebook that I kept on my lap, and recorded every penalty, every shot, the shots by period, and every goal, and it was awesome.
In the early 70s, the Maven Stan Fischler takes you under his wing. How did you become part of his flock?
I was at the time working as a copy boy with the Associated Press through another of my mentors, Hal Bach, who is a legendary hockey writer in his own right, and actually I was also working with Ben Olin, who is another member of the Elmer Ferguson fraternity and sorority, I should add, because of Helene Elliott. In any event, Hal and Stan at the time were friends and colleagues, and Stan was always looking for for interns and people who could do tasks for him. And I so wanted to learn about the art of writing, much, and of course hockey writing, that we worked it out that I would work a few hours a week in his home office on 110th Street. So I would be going to Hunter College during the day. I would be working for Stan in the afternoons, and then I would go to my AP job often at night. But Stan really taught me a pivotal life lesson about, just having belief in yourself. And one day he pressed a slip of paper into my hand, and he said, here's Gordie Howe's phone number. Call him up and get a comment on this, that, or the other thing. I don't remember what was going on at the time, but I said, Stan, well, I'm just a kid. Why would he talk to me? And Stan replied, hey, you're a member of the media. Why wouldn't he speak to you? And I do recall that I reached Gordie and that I did speak with him. I don't remember anything about the conversation, but it was a lesson that just truly resonated with me as I was really still in my teens, and I was like, well, I guess that's something I need to carry forward.
You mentioned it being a sorority as well as a fraternity. Stan's wife, Shirley, was also a sports writer. Did you have much interaction with her?
Oh yeah, because she was a vibrant element of the home office, often working on either her own show on WABC radio, or working on hockey books with Stan, or working on hockey stories of her own. So she was a vibrant, hard-nosed hockey writer, and it was she was also an extremely courageous person on a lot of levels, but not the least of which was her attempt to break the gender barrier that existed at the time relative to membership in the Pro Hockey Writers Association,
which he ultimately succeeded at.
Ultimately, yes.
So this blows my mind. You joined the Associated Press at the age of 20, and by the age of 22, when the aforementioned Hal Box steps aside, you're named National Hockey Editor. What? Listen,
I felt exactly the same way. It was an incredible. It was incredible just to get a tryout, and it was incredible at the time when I was hired. At the time when I was hired in 1970, I said, what I'd really like is I'll do this for the entirety of my college career, or what remains of my college career. But when I graduate, I would value the opportunity to get a tryout to go on staff. And Murray Rose, who interviewed me at the time, said, yeah, sure, kid. I can't imagine that he truly expected that I would stay the three and a half more years, or however long it took to graduate, and to call him to his word. But when that time came, he stood by it. And I got my tryout. I passed, and Hal was moved over to a column, so hockey became available. And really, in the 70s, hockey was not a particularly sought after beat. It was a great beat, and that being said, it was something of a niche, of a sort of an idiom that not too many people could translate. So I was fortunate enough to get a tryout at the job, and that's how it worked out. So I was at the All-Star game in Montreal, actually, in 1975, when Robin Herman of the Times was one of the first women admitted to an NHL locker room, and I was at the final, the Buffalo-Philadelphia final in 1975, when Jim Lorentz reached up into the vapors of the auditorium in Buffalo and smacked a flying bat out of the air.
We're going to go through your history, but before we do that,
I should
You
say
were
I should just finish the story, Glenn, because once the bat was prone on the ice, everybody stared around and like going like, "I'm not picking that up. Are you? Who's going to pick that up?" And so ultimately, I'm virtually sure it was Kevin Collins who was one of the linesmen at that game, and Kevin was fearless, and I believe he picked it up and
Did that make it into your game story?
I don't honestly recall, but I remember vividly that all of these tough guys staring at each other, going, I'm not touching that."
Well, you were smart enough, Frank, to keep your myriad of press passes throughout the decades and kind enough to share them with us. And from where I sit, Jackson Pollock never painted anything more beautiful than what we're looking at.
Well, it's a lot of tonnage and a lot of memories, and there are some press passes there from the Le Colisée in Quebec City, and lots of arenas that no longer exist, but or lots of NHL arenas that no longer exist. Le Colisée, I believe, is still there, but it is literally overwhelming to just spread all those experiences on the table and remember the arenas, remember the games, remember the stories, remember the people. And just going back to Elmer Ferguson again, Elmer covered the first game, the first Canadiens home game at the Montreal Forum. I covered the last one.
Well, let's go through using those press passes, some of them. Let's use those as a tour guide to go through some of the famous hockey moments you've seen in person. And we'll start in a place you already mentioned, Philadelphia. The Stanley Cup Finals in 1975, there is the press pass. In a second, I want to talk to you about that famous or infamous Flyers versus Soviet Army game in 76. But first, tell me about the age of the Broad Street Bullies and the love affair between the team and the city.
The thing that Ed Snyder did so well was he reacted in a very angry and passionate way when the Flyers were involved in a series with the St. Louis Blues a few years before the Broad Street Bullies era began. And he felt that his team was pushed around, and he said that's never going to happen again. And of course, people who have lived in the hockey time machine know that the Broad Street Bullies were the toughest, probably the toughest team of the 70s, or certainly the toughest team in the 70s, and that includes the supposed Big Bad Bruins, who are pretty good too. But the funny thing about the more subtle aspect of the skill that that Flyers team had was they were so good at killing penalties because they got so much practice at it. So one hand kind of washed the other in terms of,
I think one hand punched the other.
But the point is, they were confident that they could play as aggressively as they did and take as many penalties as they did because they killed penalties as well as they did. Of course, with when Bernie Parent was able, he was as good as they came. And, but also it was the players, the Oris Kinderchucks who won all those faceoffs and so forth, who really, really made a difference. That was a really good defense and just really a really good team. And of course, that part of their history is less spoken about because so much of the attention and the focus was on the fighting that they lived by and ultimately died by it when the Montreal Canadiens got a hold of them.
The pass on the right is from that Flyers exhibition against the Soviets in 1976. Frank, for those who don't know it, tell us the surreal story of that game and what it was like covering it.
Well, I'll back up the wagon a little bit because lots of memorable things happened at the Spectrum, and one of them was this was during the really pitched rivalry between the NHL and the World Hockey Association, and there had been a Board of Governors meeting earlier in the day, and of course, at the time in the 70s, Clarence Campbell would address the media, and he happened to be in the Spectrum press room that day. And one thing about Mr. Campbell was there was always he would sit down, prepare to address the media, and someone would always put a glass of orange juice in front of him for his refreshment. But I'll never forget, he began his remarks by saying, "Well, we got sued again by the WHA," and this was a common refrain from Mr. Campbell. That was in the same press room where subsequently or at another time, there was nothing but bedlam going on because the Flyers played this game against the visiting Russian team so viciously and took so many slashes, so many big hits and so forth that the coach pulled the Russian team off the ice and they threatened to go home. So the press room was sort of between the two dressing rooms, and there was all kinds of scurrying back and forth, from one room to the other. And subsequently, there was the message was made very, very clear to the visiting team that if you leave, you won't be getting paid the agreed upon stipend for your appearance in this game. And so suddenly the team reappeared.
And what is you, as a writer, what were you thinking?
Just another day at the Spectrum at that time. I mean, you came to expect the unexpected. But, I also remember at the Spectrum covering the game when Mario Lemieux woke up in Pittsburgh, went to the hospital for his 22nd radiation treatment for his Hodgkin's, and then got on a plane and flew to Philadelphia to play in the Spectrum that night to receive a standing ovation. One of the few from the Spectrum crowd.
Wow. Before we leave the 70s, Flyers style hockey, because leagues are leagues of imitation. If it works, we're going to copy it. And Flyers style hockey had infected the entire league. And from reading some of your pieces, it seemed like at one point you had enough with some of the shenanigans. From a pair of essays in 1978, you called stick swinging incidents a, quote, crisis, saying someone is going to get killed unless concerted, definitive action is taken. And in a separate essay, you tackled premeditated assaults on the ice, calling them carnage that drags the sport into the sewer. And it seemed to me, reading these, you were worried about the game you loved.
I was, and I can't, represent that I had, any foresight as to, what the future of the game would be if this continued. But I always, because of remembering that kid who was, literally pierced through the heart with love for the game and the beauty of it, that I saw that first night when I was at Madison Square Garden in 1965, I felt just complete sorrow that the artistry was being diminished or defaced by just the predominance of fighting. It wasn't necessary, and stick swinging was a factor. It was still a factor in the 70s, and there were some catastrophic injuries that resulted.
On to happier memories, specifically the first half of 1980, where the first half of the year was just filled with magic moments that you were witness to. And the first one was the All-Star game in Detroit, Gordie Howe's return to Joe Louis Arena.
Yeah. And it was actually just shortly after Joe Louis had opened, in fact. And there aren't too many arenas that you can say it about, and I'm sure that the sentimental fans in Detroit would disagree with me violently. But it was one of the arenas that was still built in a more or less. It was the state of the art at the time, but the state of arena art at that time wasn't very, very particularly good. And it was a huge capacity venue, 19,000, 20,000, but it was very Spartan in terms of its amenities, and the press box was laughably tight and narrow. Two people couldn't pass each other without turning to the side. So that being said, the number of astonishingly great moments there were abundant, to be sure. And that moment when Gordie Howe was introduced to, a tremendous ovation as Wayne Gretzky, the NHL rookie, stood nearby, was just a moment that provided the same amount of chills as, say, the All-Star, the anthem at the All-Star game in Chicago Stadium when the war in the Middle East was ongoing. I mean, if you have YouTube footage of that anthem, the cameras, the picture literally is shaking from the way that Chicago Stadium was trembling from the passion and from, of course, the organ. So between Joe Louis and Chicago Stadium, they were great old places, but they were old places. I'll take today's arenas anytime.
Maybe the most famous AP story under a Frank Brown byline came February 2nd in Lake Placid, New York. By the way, who is the guy in that picture?
I don't know, hair and a mustache. What is that?
Well, anyway, your story about the USSR hockey game and how it finished started this way. Mark Johnson and Mike Eruzione scored goals in a 1:21 span of the third period Friday, giving the determined United States hockey team a stunning 4-3 upset triumph over the Soviet Union. Frank, they always say there's no cheering in the press box. But what about this evening?
Well, Associated Press is like Dragnet, or the Associated Press at the time was like Dragnet. And Detective Joe Friday in the Dragnet show of the 60s or 70s, I don't remember which, always said just the facts, only the facts. And as an AP writer at the time, the spot news story was to provide only the facts. So to even use the term stunning in an AP story was hyperbole at the time, but it was so enormous. It was such an enormous global story at the time that the editors approved it. So, even though it's just the facts, there are times when you have to elevate, you have to rise to the occasion, so to speak.
The thing I want to really know is, were you having to keep your own emotions in check?
I did, but I will tell you that after the U.S. flag rose to the ceiling at the field house on Sunday, after the gold medal had been achieved, I did stand in the press box with my hand over my heart and sing the anthem as the flag rose upwards. It was one of those moments of license I allowed myself to undertake.
And what was it like in the arena those 2 days, the Friday and the Sunday against Finland, and in the Olympic Village?
If you imagine any heavyweight fight, any Stanley Cup game, any hugely important arena event, there is an energy, there is an electricity, there is just a crackling amount of emotion. And the Friday of the Russian game was it was there in earnest, even if it wasn't enough to get the American networks to show the game live. They showed it on delay, as was covered in last week's show. There was so much emotion and so much patriotic fervor, so much flag waving because of the political situation with the political matters in Afghanistan and bombing Russia and so forth. That was the subplot. One of many subplots. The other subplot was, of course, the American college kids, the American amateurs, undoing the Russian professionals. I will tell you, though, that the entire tournament, and I had gone from covering the 10-3 Russian rout of Team USA at the Garden. I had flown up to Lake Placid, actually on the flight with Team USA, and they were shaken. But the Russian team had what I felt was a terrible Olympics. They were so much better, or they felt they were so much better than their opposition, that they were able to, and this was one of their trademarks, they would turn it on. They would come out in the first 5 minutes of a period, and they would also turn it on in the last 5 minutes of a period, and they would command the third period. And when they went into overdrive, teams were not generally able to stay with them. And I think, as you mentioned in the show last week about the Canadian game, the Canadian team played a phenomenal game against Russia, but Russia in that last part of the second period and the entirety of the third period just really, really played like the team it should have been. But earlier in the tournament, they beat, I think it was Japan 16-0, and they looked lousy doing it. They looked They looked fat and lazy. They looked, indifferent, uninterested. And so, of course, I said, well, they didn't need to, they could have won 100-0. It wouldn't have mattered. But as the tournament continued, that pattern continued as well. And I'm not in any way diminishing the American triumph, not in any way. But Tretiak had struggled. Okay, he had struggled particularly with long shots, and of course, you'll recall the goal that came with 1 second left in the first period, which was an incredibly impactful moment. Was off a rebound from a long shot. So, in any event, the Russian team was there to be beat, but then you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to beat them, and that was the stunning. If that wasn't stunning enough, set against the political backdrop, you truly had nitrogen and glycerin for an explosive event.
We must also mention, because Frank Brown would be too modest to do this, that Frank Brown came to the rescue at Lake Placid after the West Germany versus Norway hockey game.
Well, I can tell you that technology was not what it is today, and the scoring system went down. They didn't have a statistical sheet on which to keep score of the game, and so I had to volunteer one of the pre-printed ones. I had photocopied or mimeographed. I don't recall exactly what it was, but I had brought a bunch of extra sheets with me to Lake Placid to make sure I could score on my own, keep track of things, keep track of the stats, and just like my days in the mezzanine at Madison Square Garden. And so I had to provide one to the facility so that they could have a score sheet, a proper score sheet for the game.
Well done, Frank. You saved Olympic hockey. But wait, we're not done with Frank Brown's 1980 Magical Mystery Tour. Where's that third press credential? Here it is. The 1980 Stanley Cup Finals. You're hired away from AP to write hockey for the New York Daily News, and you pull the press box version of a Ken Morrow. Like Morrow, you go from the Miracle on Ice to an Islanders Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and it's another one of the Spectrum press room moments for me, because it was at that final. I was covering for Associated Press, and I'm sitting in the press room having the first of my hundreds of cups of coffee in the pregame moments. And
were you like a Clarence Campbell? Was there anything besides coffee in your coffee?
No, there was nothing but coffee in the cup. And a fellow walked up to me, introduced himself, and said, "Hi, I'm Buddy Martin, sports editor of the New York Daily News, and I'm going to hire you. I've already talked to your boss." And I went, okay. How do you say no? How do you say no? And the interesting thing that seems to have happened was, with Associated Press, of course, that was a dominant sports news service at the time. It remains so, but the media universe has changed so. But it was like getting your resume in 1,200 newspapers a day. Similar to that, when you're in the news, and particularly writing about hockey, there's a possibility that some commissioners or potential commissioners might be reading you every day. Mm-hmm. Like, once again, it's like getting your resume, out into the out into the public eye. So the News hired me, and although I ended up finishing, it was actually right after that final, the 1980 final, in which Ken Morrow played such a prominent role that I was hired by the News and started covering him as an Islander, and later covered the other three of the four consecutive Stanley Cups that the Islanders generated in their dynasty.
Well, you weren't always watching the ice. Sometimes you were on the ice. We're going to show a couple of photos. The first one is in Montreal. You are looking sharp in your goalie gear there. And the second one is at the 1994 All-Star Weekend. This one is at Madison Square Garden, your kneeling bottom center. Did you ever skate between the pipes during a practice and play goal with any of the teams you covered?
I did. I played. I was in goal lots of times. After, at the end of morning skates, I would have my equipment and again, it was completely crazy to even imagine that this ever happened. But, because, I had covered, Herb Brooks's, Olympic team, he and I were, we had a relationship. So I wanted to go out and, face the shooters, who I was constantly criticizing. And so he said, go ahead and have at it. And, other times, whether it was Phil Esposito or with the Devils, John Cuniff, or I don't remember Al Arbor ever granting me permission, but with many of the Rangers teams I covered and many of the Devils teams I covered, I would end up on the ice, and I felt it was fine because, if I take shots at the players, in print, I think they're entitled to take shots at me on the ice. I think that was only fair because how many were going to hit me anyway, and
well, listen, did anyone ever go head hunting?
Oh yeah, Thomas Sandstrom loved to shoot right past my head, and the incredible thing about Thomas Sandstrom's shot was you could hear it coming. It's like if you've ever had the good luck to stand near the batting cage during batting practice at a Major League Baseball game, you hear the ball coming, and Thomas had the heaviest and hardest shot.
You're an otherwise bright guy. Why would you subject yourself to that?
I thought it was only fair. If I took shots at the players, they should be allowed to take shots at me. And I took plenty of shots, and I didn't get hit with many.
Well, even so, when you first took over the Rangers beat for the Daily News on the way to practice in Rye, New York, you were part of a pretty famous carpool.
Well, that was just another stroke of luck and the source of any number of hilarious stories. But, I lived in the city. Some of the players did too. So every once in a while I would, not every once in a while, often I would get rides from the players, and it was great to just get to know the players a little bit more. I don't think it's something that that today's media. I don't think it's a luxury that is extended to today's media. But back in the day, back in the time machine, the players were a great deal more approachable and much more, giving of their personalities, and it was no big thing. So,
well, from what I understand, Esposito was usually the driver, and who else was in the car with you?
Oh, he would drive, and he would pick up Ron Greschner and Ron Duguay, and often Barry Beck would drive, and um, it was quite.
Okay. Can you give
quite
us
emotive.
one of those
Even-
hilarious stories that's fit for print?
Well, I'll share one that Barry shared with me the day that Pierre LaRouche was obtained by the Rangers. Barry decided to pick him up, either give him a ride from practice or something like that, and introduce him to the city, or something of that nature. And they were driving down 57th Street, and Barry decided to show how bulletproof he was in terms of traffic regulations and so forth. And he made an ill-advised turn that was just against the light. So of course there's a police officer standing right nearby, waves the car over, and of course, his passenger and his new passenger from Hartford is taking all of this in, and the officer says, "You know what you did, right?" And he said, "Yeah, really sorry, but I'm Barry Beck of the Rangers." And the officer didn't really register. But then Pierre got out of the car and said, "Hi, I'm Pierre LaRouche." And he goes, "Oh, Pierre LaRouche." I'll let your friend off this one time, but you're not going to do it again, right?
Let Barry know where he stood on the totem pole, huh?
I'll let you off this once, but don't make it a habit.
Frank, you have called your work, quote, a sacred trust. You've described yourself as a strategic storyteller. Tell me what those two things are all about.
It was always a priority of mine to remember that sports writing means that you write. You don't simply type. That you write a story the way you would want to read it. You would want to be informed, educated, entertained, engrossed, and emoted to and with. There is an amazingly peculiar process in being a sports writer. It is the most exclusionary, because the process you disappear into the story, but it's also the most inclusionary, because you are reaching out to multitudes of people who you will never meet, and to establish a connection, to establish an emotional connection, a bond through the sport, but also through the language, was a priority to me. I was given the privilege of access to the greatest coaches, the greatest players, the greatest venues, the greatest life any hockey fan could imagine. I served as a representative of the fans. I asked the questions that I imagined they wanted answered. But I never forgot, ever, what I did to save up my money to buy a season ticket so that I could sit in the mezzanine with a score pad on my lap. And it was always a priority to write, not just type.
Very interesting. There's also a competition among the media that's every bit as fierce as on the ice or the field. And here's how you described it once. We all read each other because we all needed to know if somebody had a story that we needed to match or exceed and surpass. Any examples come right to mind?
Oh, it was everything every day, Glenn. And the objective, or my objective, was always to get something that no one else had. I wasn't going to, uh, if I could avoid it, follow the pack around the dressing room. I wanted to be the guy speaking with, one of the other players who might give me uh, better information, more intriguing commentary, and just something that would be a little bit different. Of course, I would always, I would always write Mark Messier. I mean, you had to write Mark Messier when he was, the alpha male in the Rangers dressing room during the Stanley Cup run and so forth. Um, but there are so many other players who never get interviewed, and who are probably as interesting, if not more interesting, because they have to work harder to keep their jobs in the lineup.
What are the secrets to getting behind athlete speak or coach speak?
I can't speak for others. I can only speak for myself. It was constant study. It was constant. I couldn't spend enough time with Herb Brooks. I can't think of any other individual who taught me more about the game than Herb. And one of the greatest mentors that any person could ask to be able to interact with, and particularly as a hockey writer. He was absolutely incredibly important in terms of educating me about the game. So, I would always do my best to tape the games back on the 1-inch, VCR cassettes, and I would always try to tape the games and watch them the next day to see things that I had missed, or to see if there were, things that I could pick up about the way a play was made or not made. I would always speak to as many of the players as I could, and just really gain as much of a broad knowledge base as possible to polish my commentary, and to have the confidence that it was coming from a base of knowledge. Yeah, I'm not saying that I didn't shoot from the hip or other body parts at other times, but I was always confident that I had an insight because of what the players and coaches shared with me.
And yet occasionally, despite your best efforts, after you packed up and you were headed home, you would agonize, you've said, over what you called parking lot leads.
It was never, the process is, it doesn't end when you send the story, Glenn. The process continues, and when you're engaged in creating the story, you think, yeah, this is absolutely the story that needs to be told. But I can't tell you the number of times when, after I had filed and after I'd given the desk the chance to read it and to ask the questions, or if I had left something out or something of that nature, I would be walking to the car to drive back and think, oh my God, that was the story. That was the lead. Why didn't I write it? And it was a constant element of second guessing, and also not ever being satisfied with the end product. It was good, can always be better, and one of Herb Brooks's more famous sayings, or what should be, is, my philosophy is simple, nobody can tell me I've accomplished enough. And that's pretty much the mentality that I brought to the keyboard.
And you go after long form writing in 1993, writing a book about the Rangers, Broadway Blues. How much did it cost, by the way, for fans to purchase a copy?
Well, this is in my smart aleck days. Because at the time I wrote it, this book was about the year that the Rangers were supposed to win their first Stanley Cup since 1940, and of course it was the it was the rallying cry, certainly of the Islander fans who delighted, of course, in rubbing 4 consecutive Stanley Cups in the Rangers' faces every time they played, and even times when they didn't. So, of course, the natural way to get some attention and some cheap publicity was to charge $19.40 for the book, and the publishers, Sagamore Publishing at the time, thought it was a great idea. So that's where it ended up being.
The book ended up spurring the Rangers, no doubt, on the next year to win that Stanley Cup and break the 54-year curse. Now, in the final against Vancouver, the Rangers lead 3-1 before they drop games 5 and 6. Do you remember what you wrote before Game 7?
Well, probably something about choking dogs.
Indeed. It is a 1-game season now for the New York Rangers, who will write history either as the biggest bunch of choking dogs or the most memorable group of players the franchise ever assembled. So take me inside MSG for Game 7.
Take everything that I mentioned about the field house at Lake Placid, for the Russian game and the Finland game, and amplify it, because the Rangers' history, their modern history, had been full of near misses, of buts, of and a but is, they were great. Yeah, they were great, but they didn't win, and so forth. It was, if there was a way of fate intervening, or bad play intervening, or bad hockey intervening, that would keep the Rangers from winning, it always had happened. And the question, the giant that the Rangers had to slay, including a ferocious Vancouver team that was really good, was slaying that demon of, okay, what's going to happen this time? What's the but going to be after Game 7? And will it be 54 more years before they win again? And, by the skin of their teeth, this was a 1-goal game, okay? That it was a 1-goal game with 1.2 seconds left. And Craig McTavish, who had been obtained by Neil Smith at the trading deadline, had to win that draw to secure the Stanley Cup, and he managed to do it. But this was the 7th game at home that they earned through their season of excellence. So they needed that 7th game at home. They got it at home, and they won that faceoff. The player who won the faceoff that clinched it was a player that Neil Smith obtained at the deadline. So there are so many variables that go into winning. It is so hard. It's still hard. It's always going to be hard. But you can imagine that when they finally won, the roof just about lifted into the sky.
The Daily News staff covering the series took a center ice photo. I recognize you. Do you remember who these other fine gentlemen are?
Yes, and I will start at my extreme left, John Delapino, who not only succeeded me on the Ranger beat at the Daily News, but also succeeded me in my role with the National Hockey League, is in the dark blazer. Next to him is John Giannone, who is to this day a terrific commentator on MSG Network on Ranger games. Over his shoulder is Colin Stevenson, who has had a great career as a sports writer with a variety of publications, including the Daily News. And to my immediate, to the right as you stare at the screen, and to my immediate left is Barry Mizell, who has made a phenomenal career in sports memorabilia and the Migray jersey business. He turned it into an industry.
In a post-Cup special section in the Daily News, there's this photo that actually includes a sixth member, Philip Bondi.
Yep.
So imagine that, Frank, a six-pack of writers for one newspaper covering hockey. In 2023, sadly, many major metropolitan dailies don't even have one beat writer.
Yeah.
Now, I'll get on my soapbox for a minute and then let you react. I don't think that's a reflection on hockey and its popularity as much as it is the devaluation of journalism, which is being demonized, and not just in the sports page, almost to extinction. So no offense to Frank Brown, who worked as communications VP for the NHL, but my view is we shouldn't rely on sports teams or any private company to report on itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It had the difference or the distinction between sports coverage today and, perfectly in 1994. Okay. 1994 was 10 years before Facebook. It was 11 years before YouTube. It was 12 years before Twitter. It was 13 years before the iPhone. It was 16 years before the iPad and Instagram, all of which have had an incredible impact on real-time content delivery, and really have completely changed the way sports writers have to perform their jobs, and have completely transformed the industry into a much more immediate, much less I don't want to say much less responsible, but the emphasis on speed is predominant in the journalistic world in which I operated. You wanted to have a story first, of course, but the news cycle was morning, afternoon, and evening, not 24/7. Huge difference.
Literally, in the Seattle Kraken press box, I watched one of my colleagues. The final horn goes off. He, with a great flourish, presses down a button on his laptop, and 5 seconds after the final horn, his story is online. But I told you I got off my soapbox. I lied, because my problem with the blogs and the tweets and all of that is that a lot of the citizen journalists aren't journalists. And when we go to lawyers, we expect them to have a degree. And when we go to doctors, we expect them to have gone to school for their specialty. And to me, journalism, and yes, I grew up in the Watergate era of let's comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and journalism is a noble profession, Woodward and Bernstein. But I think journalism should be left by and large to professionals like the other professional occupations.
It's certainly a valid point, Glenn. I will say that as much as I feel that, and as much as like I felt, that my copy would stand up to the scrutiny of the layers of editors that it went through, and that still should be operative. It is in large measure, in the still printed product. The requirements of immediacy have changed the rules, not necessarily for the better. There are just the margin for error is just entirely too large.
In all your time as a reporter, was Brian Trottier the toughest nut for you to crack? Here's what you said about him at one time. I was on a quest to help people understand what a superstar he was, and he would never help me.
Yeah. 100%. I can't tell you how great a player he was. I did my best to tell my audience what a great player he was. And he was a great quote as long as it had nothing to do with him. If you wanted to talk about Mike Bossy, he would talk about Mike Bossy all day. And he would tell you every aspect of Bossy's greatness. The same with Clark Gillies, the same with anybody else who played on those great Islander champion teams. When it came to speaking about himself, Brian, he literally just refused. He just refused. And it wasn't so much his position that it's not about me. He just refused to talk about himself, and it was frustrating to the point of infuriation. But he would not change, and I've told him this, or words, very much to the effect of what you just read, Glenn. In recent years, and he went, "Yeah, I was kind of a dummy about that." And
well, now he's written a book, so
he's written a book, so I guess he had all those words saved up, but I sure would have loved to have helped him write a smaller book for my audience.
Tell me what influenced your decision to leave the Daily News and go work for the league as vice president of communications, and whether it was what you expected it to be once you got there.
I can give you a two-part response. I saw these clouds forming over the industry at the end of my Daily News tenure. It was becoming too much about, obviously it wasn't about Twitter at the time, but there was less and less an influence on the journalistic part, and more about the just the real-time information part that I just couldn't coexist with. So that was part one. I wasn't comfortable with the way that the industry was heading. Number two, simply the NHL asked.
Another offer you couldn't refuse.
How do you say no? I mean, to be able to, again, understanding this through the filters of the decades we're talking about, Glenn, to be able to write one article and get it into the Rangers program in 1970
Yeah.
for a $50 check, to me was mind-blowing. To be able to actually be hired by the Associated Press in New York, much less to be able to have my name on articles on what was at the time the world's dominant newswire service, is unbelievable. To conjure that I could have appeared on the pages of the New York Daily News, and my photo, which proves that I needed a comb at one time in my life, is unfathomable. And so to then do a 180-degree turn and to undertake employment with the establishment that I had been writing about for decades, it wasn't even a dream come true, because you don't dream about this stuff.
As close as you were to the league when you were writing about them, what did you learn about the league and how it operates that you didn't know when you were on the other side?
Everything. I knew basically nothing. The expression that I've come to think is the most appropriate is as a hockey writer, I was examining the blemishes on the face of the game. Working for the league enabled me to watch the people who hold its heart in their hands. Huge difference. 180 degrees removed from what I imagined the reality to be. It was always easy to make fun of, the work ethic of people whose work ethics I really had, very, very little familiarity with. It was easy to say, John Ziegler was lazy, but he wasn't around very much. So, I guess that contention was supportable by evidence. But to see how hard Gary Bettman works, to see how hard Bill Daly works, to see how hard the team executives work on all of the clubs, even the ones that are just awful, to see how competitive the teams are against each other, but how supportive they are in other elements of understanding the business, of having the business move forward, and understanding that they all have to move forward together for the business to survive, was an incredible education.
You mentioned the commissioner, and Sports Business Journal wrote that you became a close confidant of Gary Bettman's, somebody he trusted. And we all think, even as fans, that we know public figures like Bettman. But working side by side with him every day for a long time, what do you think it is that we don't know or that we get wrong about the commissioner?
Work ethic, for one. Hardest working man I know. Still. Commitment to people. And he'll be probably enraged at me for sharing this, but when my mother passed away, he came to my home to pay condolence calls, not once but 3 times. An empathetic man, truly an empathetic man, unbelievable family man, who cares deeply about the people with whom he works. And listen, the term I like to use is, every day I walked into the office. When I walked in, I was steak, and when I walked out, I was hamburger. And and it's true. He beats you up. He works you hard. but it's because of the shared common objective to make the league better every second on every level and in every possible way.
Do you think he wishes he got a better reaction from the NHL public?
You know, he's been at it for so long, and his skin is pretty tough. His skin is pretty thick. Everybody would like to be liked. It can't always be the case. Separate and apart from that, though, the way that the business of the NHL has come to prosper with the real forward thinking, with the real vision that and a real fearlessness. Okay, the Winter Classic was a fearless move forward, and expansion to Las Vegas was a fearless move forward. And the other leagues were standing around waiting to see who was going to go. There was no doubt that some league was going to plant its flag in the ground at Las Vegas, and kudos to him for doing it, having the nerve.
One last silly question, and then we'll finish up with a couple that I hope won't be silly. Is it true before game one of the 98 finals at Joe Louis Arena that Joey Kocur used you as a good luck charm?
Yes. And I hope that I have it someplace. I hope that I'm able to find it. This had been an extremely contentious final. It was my first final with the league, and my job was really to facilitate access between the players and the media. And Scotty Bowman was just not having it, and the team was just not as available as it needed to be. And push came to shove from a business standpoint, ended up fining the Red Wings $50,000 for failure to provide the access that needed to be provided. And so then the night of the final, I happened to be in one of the sort of off limits areas in the Red Wings dressing room, and I saw the release that we had put out about the fine, and above the headline was a photo, a headshot of me in the middle of a bullseye, and it was scotch taped. It was scotch taped to the wall in the dressing room, and I believe I have it someplace, but it was hilarious. And I know Joe very well. I covered him as a Ranger, and it was funny, but it wasn't funny.
But he rubbed your head for good luck too.
Always.
Oh, it wasn't just that night? Because I read he rubbed your head for good luck, and then in game one of the final, he scores a goal.
Yeah, he wanted to do it again, but the head was off limits from going forward after it showed up in the bullseye. And
I understand that Washington's GM George McPhee demanded equal time from your scalp.
Yeah, George. I covered George as a rookie, and we still to this day call each other Monster for a reason I don't even remember. But he was a great guy, and he just thought that touching Buddha's head was going to bring him luck, and I guess it did.
Okay, we'll finish now where we began with the Elmer Ferguson Award. This award is so prestigious, we'll even forgive you for choosing to wear that tie.
Yeah, that was a wardrobe failure that I will get all kinds of grief for, I'm sure.
But I want to read what the former PHWA president, Mark Spector, who you mentioned at the beginning of the show, what he said about you. Quote, he stayed true, meaning you, Frank, stayed true to his tabloid roots with punchy prose, scoops, and leads. He also told hockey stories exceptionally well. And the Sporting News added, Frank Brown's byline is on top of some of the most important stories in hockey history. So one last time, let's go to your press credentials. This one from 1973, did this help you get a better table at Elaine's?
No, it certainly did not. But the thing that I'm fascinated by is the number in the bottom left corner. I was number 282 at the time, and my number when I retired was considerably lower.
Which we're going to show now. Like a credit card company with a valued customer, you get upgraded to lifetime status. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, in one instance, at the time, it was in terms of the number of years of membership. Subsequently, it's been altered to Elmer Ferguson honorees and a certain level of tenure. But I will tell you that number one that was retired for Red Fisher, who worked with Clarence Campbell, as I may have mentioned, to have Elmer's name attached to the Hall of Fame award. Elmer, believe it or not, when the PHWA was formed in 1967, Jack Delmage, who was the Secretary Treasurer at the time, assigned Elmer number 14. So it's interesting to me that Red is number one. He helped create the Elmer Ferguson Award. Elmer was number 14, and it's mind-boggling to me that I'm number 19.
Well, I know one perk of membership. Tell us about this photo from 2013, you with President Obama.
You know, this was another one of my, well, I need to do this kind of moments. It was rather like when I sang the national anthem to myself in the press box at Lake Placid. But of course, it's the practice of the president to invite the championship team to the White House, and because the commissioner attended, I attended as well. And I kind of wasn't invited to be in that room, but I said, you know what? I'm going to meet me a president. And so next to me in the red tie is Brandon Faber, who is no longer with the team names, the Bears now, I believe, and over his shoulder is Pete Hassan. But I said, I'm going to take this opportunity as an NHL executive to shake the hand of the President of the United States. And it's a moment I'll always cherish.
Were you nervous?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Hell yeah. But I will tell you that he looked directly into my eyes and said hello, even though he had absolutely no idea who I was. And, but it's yet another, real, just an astonishing thing, Glenn, to look at that photo and imagine what the game has given me, what hockey has given me, the thrills, the excitement, and the honors. I used to think that I gave my life to the game, but when I imagine the life that the game gave to me, there's no comparison.
Well, clearly, Frank, all of your glory days didn't happen in high school. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights. It was wonderful to spend time with you. Thank you so much.
It was a delight, as always, Glenn.
And thank you for watching, and good night for Hockey Time Machine.